Howdy, everybody. We're going to give a quick second
Wow.
to make sure that we are all in here. There's always a little bit of a delay on people coming in. Just make sure that we're live. Tell us if you can see us. Aha, we are live. Hello, everybody. How are you on this Thursday? We are halfway through the month of June and less than a week before the official start of summer 2023. Welcome to Mediavine's Teal Talk, the show about anything and everything related to the business of content creation. I'm your host, Jenny Guy. Continuing on the rude time being an illusion theme from just a moment ago, we are practically finished with Q2 in 2023, which I don't know if there's anybody else. It is rocketing by for me. Ladies, how about you? This is wild for you.
Flying by.
A terrifying conversation, actually.
Yes, I know. I cannot believe when I was realizing that it's almost end of Q2, which is what we're about to talk about. It blows my mind. But what we're talking about today is with increasing privacy regulations and AI developments dominating the headlines, what we are talking about a lot in this time here at Mediavine is revenue diversification. Today, we're talking specifically about an oldie but a goodie income stream that hasn't gotten as much airtime recently as we feel it deserves. So whether you call it sponsored content, influencer marketing, or as we call it around here, influencer partnerships, when done well, working with brands is a great way to add to your bottom line during those regular seasonal dips in ad revenue. But how do you do it well? And are brands even interested in working with content creators anymore? For these answers and more, I've got my two guests today from Mediavine's own influencer partnerships team, Danielle Spiesman-Owens and Gabriella Crespo. Welcome, ladies.
Hi, happy to be here.
Thank you guys so much for coming. And everybody out there, I'm going to read some impressive words about you guys, but just a quick reminder that if you have any questions for Gabriella or Danielle, just drop them into the comments and the wonderful Mediavine marketing and communications team will pass them on to us. Let's hear about our guests. Danielle Spiesman-Owens, Director of Influencer Partnerships, joined Mediavine 3.5 years ago. With a background in creative branded content ideation and influencer marketing strategies, Danielle develops impactful campaigns for brands using the influential voices of our Mediavine publishers, leading the department and helping advertisers authentically reach their target consumers while providing additional revenue streams to our bloggers. And Gabriella Crespo has been with Mediavine as an influencer partnerships analyst for 2 years. She loves crafting influencer campaigns that drive brand awareness and enhance online presence through authentic voices. She currently lives in Chicago and loves exploring with her dog, Petal. Not gonna lie, Petal's stories are notorious and very highly coveted at the Mediavine Slack. We all love to hear about Petal. Danielle and Gabrielle, it's so great to have you here. Thank you for being here. So to kick things off, how would you define influencer partnerships or sponsored work? And Danielle, let's kick off with you.
Yeah.
What does that look like at Mediavine?
Sure. So Mediavine, obviously, we're here to support all of our publishers for all their ad management. Influencer partnerships here is sort of a neat department. Clearly, I lead it, so I'm a big fan, but we're here to be another opportunity to diversify exactly what we were talking about, revenue streams, and provide other opportunities for our influencers, our publishers, our creators, we'll use those terms probably interchangeably today, to work with brands in a variety of ways, sponsored work, evergreen SEO-friendly blog content, whatever the new social media shiny object is, and helping them work with brands in a variety of ways to make other revenue streams. And so we have a full department here that almost acts as like an in-house agency, helping our influencers find brands that make sense for them and are the right voices and partnerships to help your businesses grow. And then on the flip side, we work with brands and agencies that represent brands directly to help fulfill those campaigns. And someone like Gabriella on our team really heads up our strategy and our analytics and looking at what's trending, and then also learning about all of you guys and really, what your voices are like, what you're writing about, and who makes sense to pitch for different campaigns. So that's sort of us in a nutshell. But I think that influencer marketing is still so critical and important, and more people are trusting these voices and these audiences that you guys have cultivated, and brands are not only coming around to remembering that and recognizing that, but putting more dollars there again. So
anything to add, Gabriella?
I was just taking note of everything she was saying, and I was like, wow, she's so good at describing what we do. So no, nothing to add.
Awesome. Well, thank you for giving that overview. And let's go industry wide. Why is working with brands so vital to the blogging business? And specifically, what I mentioned earlier, why is diversification so important to a content creator's revenue stream? Gabriella, you want to start off there?
Yeah, I think that it's growing increasingly more important, especially as like more ad dollars are shifting to influencer marketing. I think it's on track to be like an $18 billion industry next year. So people are recognizing more and more how impactful influencers are, and how like the authentic connection between an influencer and their audience is sometimes more beneficial than just an ad. Also speaking to that too is like as third-party data goes away and there's more roadblocks, the more often you can be in front of your audience and connecting with them, I think it's just going to be more beneficial in the long run.
Absolutely. And yeah, as you said, with third-party cookies, the seasonality of ad revenue, any other, this is a direct paycheck, which is a very appealing concept. So how have you guys seen brand partnerships and this type of work change in the last few years since the pandemic has happened? Danielle, you were mentioning that you're seeing it start to come back. So what's hot right now? What are the brands looking for?
Yeah, it's been really, I know. TikTok is a shiny hot object for sure. I think what's really interesting, so I think you mentioned this briefly in my bio, but I started here about 3.5 years ago. So we're talking January 2020, right before the pandemic. And one thing I think that we got to see done really well is that brands that had plans to do different activations using influencers, they had this ability to pivot those conversations and still reach those audiences very quickly, very authentically, right? We went from having big travel campaigns to road trips and big gatherings to holiday hosting at home. And they were able to really pivot that message. And I think that actually helped build that strength because I know for myself, I was pregnant during the pandemic. That's probably a time I found a lot of influencers that I followed because I felt alone and I could start to identify with someone who was going through a similar situation. Gabriella and I do a lot of research and, clearly looking at how consumers connect. And I think that she talked about that ability to build that authentic audience. They've marketed super well. And so one thing I wanted to say, what I see coming back is tying it back to blogging specifically. So we get a lot of asks for social campaigns only, TikTok campaigns, social video, all of those things are really important. But one thing we really try to do is package up campaigns that still include some of that evergreen SEO content that you own, because there's so much value to that. We have brands that come to us now that are seeing ranking keywords and posts that are still performing really well from them year over year. And maybe we do some new social stuff, get you some more money for that same post and drive some traffic back to that same exact post that was sponsored once before. So there's a variety of ways it keeps making money, but also with algorithms and new social platforms and things, having that home base that you own, which is why you guys are here, I think is still so important. So when some people say like no one cares about bloggers anymore, I'm seeing like clearly a big difference there, that they are finding it interesting for that evergreen purpose too.
Awesome. Anything to add, Gabrielle?
Yeah, just we mentioned it briefly, the big beast of TikTok, but the brands are leaning more and more into short form video, and everything is trying to be TikTok right now. There's YouTube Shorts, there's Instagram Reels. Who knows what else is going to have its own TikTok-like feature, but those like 15 to 60-second videos of you being yourself or talking about products, brands are really after that right now because they're so impactful. And that is something that even in the past year has shifted so much. Before, a lot of brands were very afraid to step into TikTok, and now they're like, how do we do this? Like, how can we do this for Reels? How can we translate this content into short form video and not just a blog post? So that's been a really interesting shift and been like fun to see.
With that, you said brands sometimes are a little hesitant to accept, and then sometimes they go all the way in on that new thing that they may not even exactly know how they're going to incorporate it into their strategy, but they just know everyone's on TikTok. We should be on TikTok. So to redirect a little bit on this, what are the specific KPIs that a brand is currently looking for? Like, is it sales? Is it more brand awareness? Is it content? Is it, what are we looking for here?
Yeah, so
Either
I
of you.
think it depends truly on the brand and their size. A lot of smaller brands are really looking for that brand awareness play. And those are brands that are, in our experience, are really heavily leaning into blog posts and evergreen content because that helps them with their SEO, and just getting on the market. And then you'll have bigger brands that are looking for those hard conversions. So they're looking for those TikTok videos that are going to drive people to a link, drive people to a sale, drive people to an affiliate code. It truly just depends on who the brand is.
Great. Anything to add, Danielle?
I think two things. One, whether it's us working with a brand or you pitching yourself directly, which I know we'll probably get further into. I think it's just important to identify those KPIs as much as we can up front. Sometimes they change, but we know influencer marketing, we use the term sales funnel a lot on our end, and we can move people through, right, from awareness all the way through making that purchase. We talk a lot about like qualitative data that if you're working with the brand, look at saves, look at shares. Those are people who have like an intent to go back and do something later. And so that's why not only the evergreen stuff helps, but those other metrics are really telling with influencer marketing. And so it's building that case also around it. So they see the value in both.
And I know that way back long ago, I was a brand myself, the dark ages of it, when dinosaurs walked the earth. And one of the big struggles that we had was convincing some of the higher ups at the brand that it wasn't just about follower numbers. That was a big, and I started to see that shift, we were actually resonating with the brands that engagement matters, reshares matter, comments matter, like that engagement. So Gabriella, you are dying to jump in here. Jump in.
I just think we're going to pry vanity metrics from brands cold dead hands. I think it's never going to be something that people like are able to get past. It does require like a lot of education. Like, yeah, someone could have a lot of followers and the connection with their audience isn't there. You can tell based on the comments, you can tell based on the likes. So part of our job too, and when we're pitching brands, is a lot of storytelling. So we do a lot of, we love this creator because of this connection they have with their audience, or these are the kind of comments that they're getting. This is the kind of feedback that they're getting. And we like to share as much as possible with brands because like we need to pull them away from vanity metrics as much as possible, because at the end of the day, you could create a campaign with people who have thousands and thousands and thousands of followers or thousands and thousands of like viewers, and it's not going to have the same impact as someone who has all of those things but also has a connection with their audience. It's why like engagement rates as you get more followers fall heavily, because the more followers and the more celebrity status someone achieves, you kind of lose that ability to authentically connect with your audience.
So there's value in both, is what I'm hearing you say. That
Yes.
It depends on what the brand's goals are, and so a lot of that is divining those goals, storytelling them, and educating, working with them to figure out what those are. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because I think it's a lot about positioning what your strengths are when it comes to everybody's favorite word, pitching. It's either their favorite or their least favorite. Some people love to pitch, but I would say it may be generally more true that people don't love to pitch. So let's talk about pitching. Are there any do's and don'ts that you would share, Danielle, immediately?
I think so. I think one thing that's important is if you're going to pitch a brand is to spend some time looking at them, right? Like spend some time on their social. Do they create content? Have they worked with influencers before? Do they have a similar voice that aligns with like the other things that you already share in your content? Like be strategic about who you're pitching with your time. Do that research. Understand that, you might be doing something unique with your editorial calendar, something that you have a plan to do that might make you be a standout, but is a perfect fit for that brand. So if you can make that pitch a little bit more unique, not so general. We all have those general metrics. Maybe they just want to quickly see your follower number and your engagement rate. But what if you were able to really pull something from what you saw and say, actually, here's a post I've done that's ranked on a similar topic that does really well, or, give them those examples So I think it's the do's are use your time strategically and try to find partnerships with the brands that you're authentically talking about or that you want to talk about long term. I think one thing we saw at the start of this year, we always kick off every year with the word trends, and we kept seeing the word long-term partnerships, which to me is not a trend at all. It's just talking about something with time and maybe, I don't know, getting paid more than once to talk about something because you might create content over and over again, right? And so creating a relationship with the brand that you become more of like an ambassador with influence, not just a one-off influencer, can be really powerful. So I think you can stand out if you already show that without this payment, you already, like Gabriella said, you're connecting with those people authentically. So protect yourself. Don't get into a situation where you're going to be now endorsing a brand that's going to feel cringy to your audience or like you just sold out for a paycheck for it, right? Like we can all feel that when we're consumers as well. So that would be a don't, but also the do's is just take some time with who you're pitching and look at them and understand the brand. I think that's really important. And then I know we'll get further into it, but just protecting yourself. Brands may be pitching you, you may be pitching them, but really understanding what the scope of work is that they want, what the timeline is, and how they want to use that content. So when you move to that next phase, hopefully past pitching, you're really protected and you're all on the same page.
Really helpful. I will say that one thing I always used to advocate for was in terms of detecting what brands, where to target, look at the ones you're already talking about. And chances are, if you look at your own social posts, like if you're a food blogger and you look at a lot of the content you're creating, there are brands in the content that you're already creating, whether you mean to do it or not. And there are things that you just naturally love and want to talk about anyway and are talking about. I cannot emphasize enough, especially maybe even on those smaller brands, there are human beings behind those brands. They love their product and they love it when you love their product. And when you can organically tell them authentically, I really do love your product, it goes a long, long way. It's the same as a job interview. When somebody shows up and you say, what can you tell us about the company? And you're like, I see that you are a company with a business, and or if they like reference the specific thing that they saw, it goes a long way. It matters.
Totally. Gabriella's heard me tell this, but I went to a conference recently, and I won't name names, but in one of the panels, there were several brands, and they gave an opportunity. There were a lot of creators in the room, and they opened it up to allow a couple people to just pitch on themselves on the spot. And it was really one woman just connected on such an emotional level with this brand. She talked about hard-hitting facts. She talked about societal impacts and what it was doing to her audience and why that product was helpful to them. I mean, I have chills thinking about it right now because she just like really connected with that brand on an educational way, she understood who they were trying to reach and then how it reaches her audience. And they asked her for her number on the spot, right? But there was a difference between someone who just was like, I reached this, it kept it very generic. There was such a difference when someone, I think influencer marketing works because it pulls at the heartstrings, right? It is that ability to connect on that storytelling level, and it starts at the pitch.
Absolutely. And I think going beyond that, we all want money, but I don't know if anybody else watched Parks and Rec, but money, please, is not the best way to go into a pitch for that. So we know we want to personalize that pitch letter. How do we find the person we're going to be pitching to? How do you go about tracking that information, Gabriella? And who is the decision maker?
So the decision maker varies depending on who you're working with. A lot of brands do brand direct, so they're the ones that are going to be working with the influencers, but a lot of them work with agencies who handle all of that for them. So things can get a little tricky there, but if you want more visibility with brands, like you said, like if you're already using their products, tagging them in that user-generated content, they pay attention to that on their socials. And also, I think that like DMs are a really good way to go about getting even a little bit of info from brands. And then also
sliding into the DM.
Gabriella. Yeah, always sliding into DMs. Also, like info at whatever website is usually also a good way to go because they can direct you to where you need to be. But I think it's kind of hard to find contacts, even like us on like more of like the agency side. Like that is something that we work at every day. But also like networking with other people who have done partnerships with companies that you want to work with. Even just asking them like, hey, like who is your brand contact for this, if you don't mind me asking, And honestly, they're always looking for people to work with. So if you're reaching out to them, they're not going to be upset about it. You're doing part of their job for them and making it easier for you to be found. So
absolutely. And so we have some questions from the audience,
For sure.
and C has a great question that I'm going to come to in just a second, but I want to stay on this one moment.
Yeah.
So we're putting together our cold pitch, and we know we're working, we're networking, we're creeping on their socials to see if they're already working with brands or with influencers. We see the influencers. Maybe you know someone who knows someone who knows that influencer, and you can possibly like slide into their DMs and get the contact info. We have the right person. We have our pitch. We love the brand. What other things do we need to have in place? Is it a media kit? Is it a one-sheeter? Should it be 50 pages? Should you include how do you tell the story that is going to position you the best? And let's start maybe Danielle on this one, and then go to Gabriella.
Yeah, I think it's tricky, right? We're in a season where brands and advertisers are also in this phase of unknowns of like, okay, we're going to put budget here, then we're not. They may have a planning cycle and then they might not. Sometimes we feel like we get ghosted and then we like suddenly hear from them again. So I think, one thing to just arm yourself with is that if you don't get a response, doesn't necessarily mean that you didn't get on their radar. So just like we talk about multiple touch points with content, sometimes you need multiple touch points with your outreach, and that's okay. Another thing that, you started this kind of kickoff, Jenny, talking about influencer marketing, branded content. We use social media. People in this industry have titles across the board who also wear many hats, but may need to work with creators in a variety of ways. So just that was one thing I wanted to add. When you're looking for context potentially, think about those different buyers or those people that wear different roles, because someone who's buying for social might sit in a different seat than like branded content. And it might be, someone at a PR firm and someone brand direct, and you can pitch them both. What was your actual question? I just went on a tangent. I honestly forgot the origin question.
Yeah. And I think Danielle or Gabriella may have some stuff on that.
Yeah, good.
Talking about maybe a media kit.
Oh yeah,
right,
for sure.
That's right. Sorry. Yes.
Yes. So as far as media kits go, I think they're a great way to show like your engagement levels and like a easy one sheeter. I advocate on the one sheet. The more information, the more likely it's going to get glossed over. With your follower accounts, always links to your different social channels. And then maybe even a few links to like content that has done really well for you, things that you are really proud of, things that have received a lot of engagement or like really resonated with your followers. I don't think you should be including rates in your media kit when you're doing pitching. I think that is something that could get you foxholed into something that getting paid less than what the scope of work is. I think that's something that should be negotiated later and not right off the bat. You have no idea what the brand wants. And once you set your tone with rates, that gives them an opportunity to be like, well, you said this, like, why isn't it this amount? Which is very frustrating to deal with. So I definitely think a media kit with all your links, and the shorter, the better. And if you want to be a little more personal, you can kind of give them some thought starters that you had, like, oh, I would incorporate your product into my content this way, without giving away too much. So you're not giving away any of your like proprietary thoughts and content, but just a little taste of what they could get working with you, I think is a really good idea.
And are you changing the actual one sheeter itself, or are you keeping a steady one sheeter and then in the body of your email in that pitch?
So if you're going to include links that are to like content that you really like, I would change it up, make it more focused on the brand you're pitching, and definitely be changing the body of the email always. Like, you need to be talking like as if you're having a one-on-one conversation. You can't do anything generic.
How are you?
Yeah. No like fillers, no mail merges or anything. Like you should tailor every single thing. And I think you mentioned this earlier, but being like, oh, I saw that you guys just did this campaign and I really liked it and it resonated with me because of this, or like I used your product the exact same way. So the more personal, the better, because it shows that you're really going to be able to seamlessly weave the brand into your content.
I think too, remembering that it's a professional business exchange. So like, just like for us, we get frustrated when a brand doesn't write us back. We get frustrated when bloggers are hard to get responsiveness. So just remember in all of those engagements that you're making a business transaction, you want to keep it lighthearted and conversational, but professional and about their needs at the same time. So like Gabriella said, if you did a post that organically did really well using their product or a like-minded product, pull that out to the forefront so that they could see why their dollars would make sense going to you, because there are so many people pitching. So it's really connecting those dots. And then I was just going to say, while you we don't want you to like copy paste all the time. You also don't need to recreate the wheel every time either. So if you've done this research around a particular type of product and you could use that information to pitch, I don't want to say they're competitors because you're trying to endorse something you authentically use, but if they're like-minded products, there are other things that are aligning, just you can knock out a few at one if you can. So.
Absolutely. I think keeping a file, a folder, something that you have easy access to with your basics that you can then cater and change out is helpful. I also wanted to say a great tip here is, you've already touched on it, Gabriella, is making it easy on the brand to reach all of the things they want to, so they don't have to play hide and go seek or Marco Polo with all of your stats.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is also not this is the time to get that branded email address. Gmail is gone. You are a business. Your brand is your business. You need to be able to be reached at your domain.
Branded email, and then also ensuring that your socials are easily accessible from your blog. That's something that we run into a lot, where they'll have really great blogs and I know that they have really good social following, but it's not linked together at all. That makes it difficult. If it makes it difficult for me, it makes it near impossible for brands.
Yeah. I think going back to like the length and the attention span is nobody's got time, right? So you want to have your media kit be enough to whet their appetite and entice them to want to learn more, but they're not going to read through something super long, like you said, Jenny. And then I think they might click through to look at your site, but like sometimes we have to then go Google so-and-so's TikTok to like check it out. And we might take that time or have the bandwidth, but the brand might just be like, ugh, nope, too hard. So making everything easy. If you're putting time and energy into building a certain like social audience, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or any of those, make sure we can find it really, really easy. It helps everyone.
So we've got questions here saying, can we talk about the email you use when you run multiple brands at a time? And Brittany says, I want to hear about the type of email. Gmail makes my life so much easier. Do you have any recommendations there? Any thoughts?
My only recommendation would be that include your name in your email. Because a lot of times when brands are looking for influencers, they're looking for them by name. And while the brand name should be in your domain, I just think it can make things complicated if your email is like, oh, this is my blog versus, oh, we've passed along the name of this influencer. Like now we need to find them. So I think that can get a little dicey there, but
we're trying
I'm trying to read the comments.
No.
I'm getting
get out of those comments, Gabriella. You don't need those comments. Knock it off. All right. So we talked about.
I have no good advice for this.
Well, it's hard, and I think setting up some forwarding things too. Yeah, using Gmail, but also setting up the domain there. So if we talked about pitching, we talked about a little about media kits. I am starting this one with the caveat that none of us on this program currently are lawyers, just so everyone knows for a fact. We're going to throw that out there. But let's talk a little bit about contracts. C had a question talking about how do you work with a brand who only wants to pay in product. There's a lot of different things here, but let's talk about contracts. Do you need one, even if you're only working in exchange for that product? What are standards on contracting with brands, and where can you negotiate if you can? Gabriella, let's start with you. That's great. And then we'll go to Danielle.
Sure.
This is a big old topic.
Yeah.
You definitely need a contract. I don't ever recommend doing sponsored work in exchange for product because you still have to pay taxes on products you receive, and a product is only as useful to you as that product is. It's not the same as getting a paycheck. A lot of times brands do want to just work in exchange of a product. And if it's a product you need, or if it's a product you're already going to use, then go for it. But I think I think the original question was, how do you work with brands like that? I think you can express to them like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for this offer. However, I'm not doing exchange content right now. Like, these are my rates. I'd be happy to work with you as you're like a brand I really like. I think you can be really polite and kind in your responses, but I am just hesitant to ever recommend that anyone work for free product.
I want to add that there's just power in saying no sometimes. It's also okay to protect that this is your business, right? At Mediavine, we're helping you guys have sustainable businesses. So if you start out, if it's a product even that you love, right, and they love you because they've been watching you talk about it and they've watched how you've built and cultivated this audience and you've marketed it so well, and now they want to leverage that amazing marketing that you've done for yourself, well, it should cost them, right? And I think that there are a lot of these brands that have affiliate programs, which I think is another great way to diversify revenue. We have brands that come to us to talk about affiliates, and I think there's value in being paid for your content. You guys are photographers, videographers, editors, all of these things. You're writers, you're doing all this stuff, and finding out all the different ways to diversify your revenue. But if at a jump you're just accepting product and then giving them a bunch of content for it, it's going to be really hard to like backtrack and then build that relationship later. And so I think it's okay to advocate for yourself from the jump, and say, no, I don't work for just product. I'm happy to share my rates and go from there or learn more about what you're looking for. I think the other really important piece to protect yourself, and even if you do it in that sense, is to have that contract in place to make sure they're not using your content in any other way. I think that's where contracts are really important: usage rights and whitelisting, all these other things, exclusivity. Those are things that we really pay attention to in our contracts. And so even if you're not getting paid, it's still your content and your voice and your face. So you want to be protected.
All of that's really great help. So step one is always contract, no matter what. Anytime that you are having some sort of an exchange of your content for X, there needs to be, like Danielle was saying so perfectly, like protection. It's your content. You need to determine who uses the content, what the rights are, because there are a lot of brands that want specific pieces. Some brands really want you to create original recipes, but you need to make darn sure that it's clear who owns what and how long they're allowed to use it on their site. If that's a finite period, are they asking you to switch ads off on the post on your website? That costs more money, all of those things. The other thing I was going to say is I'm a little bit different in that if it's if Acura wants to work with me and they want to give me a car, I'm going to take a car. Or I'm going to, if I want to take my family on a cruise for 2 weeks, and Viking is like, we want to send 10 of you. Like, I understand it, but I think you're very spot on, Danielle, in that it's hard to walk back. So what I heard from everything we said is that negotiation is key.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is. And for every campaign, so even though we may have a rough idea what some of our creators may charge, or, whatever it is, for every single campaign, potential opportunity, we're going to ask, what would you charge for this? Right. And because we know that there are things that are really determined, in that scope of work, how much content, the exclusivity and things, but also what's going on in your life, right? Is Q4 a time that like your rates go up a little bit more because it's like a peak traffic time for you. And, if you're going to carve out the time and the bandwidth to do a campaign, well, you'll do it, but it might cost you a little bit more money at that time. Just using that as an example. But I think it's, going back to Gabriella saying, not going out the door with a rate on your media kit, and just like trying to do a little back and forth. What are your objectives? What's the timeline? What are the tactics that you want used and why? And then figuring out a fair price point, that will work. Sometimes it's helpful, again, that long-term partnership, if they don't have the huge budget up front, having an understanding that, okay, this first round is going to be X, but we have an agreement that we're going to do a second round of content when whenever their buying cycle is, a few months from now or something like that. So just, making sure that in the long run, it's going to be worth your while to continue to make money.
And negotiate down on what the deliverables are. If you're talking about that scope of work, like for instance, see if it's like a really swanky stroller that you're all about and you want, and you'd be paying, $750, $1,500. I don't know how much they cost, but it's a lot of, maybe it's a lot of money, and you know that you would want one anyway. Okay, well, I won't give you a blog post with associated social shares for that stroller, but I will do a series of 3 Instagram stories or a reel or whatever it is. And then you say, then if you want to, for instance, you have an affiliate program that you're getting ready to build, and you negotiate a really high rate for yourself for those conversions. And you're because that's where, especially with high dollar items, that's where the conversions happen. It's that repeated mention, and people that are consuming a lot of your content and they know that you love the brand, they trust you. It's that trusted relationship. The other thing
I
I was
think
going to
that,
say, oh, go ahead, Danielle.
no, I was just going to say that I think going back to even that authentic pitch, right? You're telling that story of why you're going to move the needle for that brand. Okay, worked out perfectly. Now we're going to talk about a negotiation. Well, hey, we just want this. We want, this type of content. We want exclusivity for X amount of months, and we want to be able to put it in an ad unit. And we say, great, it's going to cost you this magical number. And they're like, we don't have that. And you still really want to work with that brand, then you come back to them and you say, okay, I want this partnership to work. If we take out that exclusivity, if we scale down this or that, can we start this partnership with a number that you guys are still comfortable with, where it's, again, it makes sense for you. But I think like learning all of those things they want, but now you're sexy to them. You've built up that, that story. You've made them go like, they're different than just this other influencer who doesn't have that organic traffic or can't speak to the brand safety that you guys all have, or all the good things that can tell your story to be a standout. Leverage that in your negotiation, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing I was also going to ask about you guys is, how are you seeing, if you are seeing email factoring into brand deals? Because brands that are smart and really want conversions, like we know emails are your super fans. Emails are the people who click, they buy. Is that something that you've seen added to media kits and negotiated as a part of a contract? Gabriella,
I
what
feel
have you
like,
seen?
Oh
Danielle.
yeah, either of us can talk about it because we talk about it all the time. Yeah, brands are really looking for newsletter inclusion right now. They know how beneficial it is to be a part of a newsletter that has a really high open rate. That's definitely something that even people have just sprinkled on because it's such little work for them. But they're like, oh, and for an extra like this amount, you can have newsletter inclusion, and that makes you look very fancy and very attractive or sexy, as Danielle said earlier, to the brand, like a little added.
I mean, we have some really sexy publishers, so I
it's
think that's a totally
advertising.
justified word.
It's still advertising. It's got to be sexy. Yeah.
And it does like build up that goodwill too, because it's such like like I can do this for you too because I love your brand. And then later when they're planning again, you're top of mind. They're like, oh, this influencer did this for us. They included us in their newsletter for such like a nominal amount. Like, let's add them back in. Love that.
Also, it's a key differentiator to TikTok. TikTok fans don't have emails, guys.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah, you do. I think it goes back to Jenny when we were talking about like seeing things that may seem new and shiny, but they're actually old, right? Like newsletters for early blogging days, like we used to sell those a lot. And then it kind of became uncool. And now we are seeing it cool again because I know that there are certain newsletters that I read regularly because I get them from people that I've trusted. And so there's this shift where newsletters again are kind of cool. There's an authentic way. So that's one thing I'd say. If you do have a strong newsletter audience, a strong open rate, strong conversions, that is something to pull to the forefront in your media kit, or just really in any of your strong suits. Like pull those wins out to make sure we know. But that could be a big differentiator between them just DMing someone through TikTok or Instagram and then the information they get back from you, that you have a great engaged Instagram, but also the strong newsletter. Well, now you became more attractive to them.
I always say with the media kit, you're emphasizing your superpowers. So while we had someone ask about saving a sample one sheet, I don't know that there is a sample one sheet. I think that this is your chance to shine in your area. So if you have like 5 followers on Twitter, but everybody else has their like stats listed in Twitter, don't put Twitter on there if you only have 5. But if you are, like Danielle was saying, lead with your email. If that's where you're super awesome. We had a question from Marlene about what do brands consider a high open rate? I'm guessing that there's some variance there, but any thoughts?
It does truly depend on the brand and the brand size because they're going to consider anything higher than their open rate a high open rate. And I guarantee that their open rates are probably like 2 to 6%.
Yeah, low. Yeah.
Very low. So I think if you can be like, oh, I have this many audience members, this is our open rate, and how you're going to position it, they're going to be paying attention a lot less to that than like I would be if I was pitching an influencer to someone. So,
and I think if you don't know if it's a strong story or not, but you have it, you have engagement and you have a great list, then pull out those strong stories, because sometimes these people are asking for these metrics. They don't even know why they want to know, right? Like sometimes people ask us for a range of engagement rates, right? Well, we don't always know exactly the voices for a campaign yet, and that can vary, and everyone calculates engagement rates differently. But sometimes we can give them a large enough range, and that just like checks the box to them. They feel warm and fuzzy. And so they don't really know. They're not the experts about your audience, your content, your metrics the way you are, or the way that we are when we're pitching people. So remember that like they might be questioning, but really they're looking to you as being the expert in that space, because a lot of times they know their brand really well. They don't know influencer marketing very well, but they maybe read an article that said an open rate of X means something, you know?
Yeah. And Brian just made the great point in the comments about open rate versus click-through rate. Like, find the way to tell the story in your media kit that puts you in the most favorable light, especially if you have stats on like what you can make people buy.
Yeah.
You can drive them to a brand's website. Like, if you can get that data, that's gold. Gabrielle, did you have something to add?
I was just going to say there's no harm in telling a story and telling the story any way you're able to.
Absolutely. No, you're putting yourself in your most favorable light.
Correct.
You're not going to put at the top of your resume, like, I'm really bad at X. That is not how anybody leads off. And it's not how you should lead off in your media kit. Mike had a question. Mike said, my website focuses on road trips and day trips in Florida. I have an email newsletter that has 17,000 subscribers and a 45% open rate. Do you think that's enough to attract a car brand? Jenny gave me the idea with her Acura comment.
Jenny, I feel like you're doing some influencing on this call right now. I mean, I would go for it. I don't know distinctly about car brands working with influencers. I know that they do. I don't know what the capacity of that typically is. We've never really done that. But yeah, I mean,
I think that's it.
Pitch whoever you want.
Yeah. It's super niche. It's super strong, right? You've got a way to connect directly with them, and then you've got the stats to back it up. And if you put together something that tells that story, maybe do Acura, but if you've got some other brands that, you know, it tells that story too, just pitch them that same strong, you know, that strong story about yourself and your brand that you've already put together. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Ellen nailed it. She said, try a rental car company.
For sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or a Florida specific brand who wants to rep pride. Like,
There's also a lot of RV like flipping companies that have been looking for influencers lately. And I think that's a really fun and interesting route to go for.
Did you just say RV flipping?
Yeah. Like they'll like customize an RV or like a Sprinter for you. And then you travel around, or like, this company did this for me. Look how great it is.
I've never heard of it, but that's amazing. Cool. I just learned. Thank you. I'm keep learning from you guys so much. So one of the questions we get a lot here, and we've already said, no, we are not going to put our rates on our media kit, because that's going to stop a conversation as opposed to have the conversation. That's what we want. We want to have that where we can get the information from the brands about what they're really looking for and negotiate. But at some point, that is going to come up. We're going to have to put a number down. We are going to have to say what it costs. We know that there is so much variance in this about how you would actually set a price, but do you have any tips on where to go, what to look for, what to consider? And I'll start with Danielle on that one.
Well, one thing, you won't always get an answer, but it can never hurt to ask, do you guys have a budget in mind for this? You know, sometimes we'll just start it with that, because if you can get an idea right off jump, then you can, know like, okay, maybe they don't have a huge budget, but I could make it work for that. And I would really like to work with this brand. Or you're like, they really don't have it. So I think that's just one thing, doesn't always work, but it's a good place to start, because sometimes people think they can't ask those questions, and you can, because you're trying to set a rate that hopefully will work for both of you. So that's one thing. I think, again, once you've learned that scope of work, really take the time to look at what the ask is, right? If they're asking for exclusivity for 6 months and they don't want you to use any competing brands, right, for that time frame, well, is that going to prohibit you from making other money? Then this may need to come at a higher cost. So I think just really understanding that full scope of work before, like we said, you go back with a rate is really important, because all of those things should cost them. If they're going to use it as an ad, they want to feature it on their website, they want to use your face and likelihood, like, again, there are a lot of influencers out there that maybe just have a social presence, but our Mediavine, publishers, our influencers, you guys have cultivated amazing businesses with your content, with your social, with all of this. And so I think just remember to be confident when you're setting that rate, because you've worked hard to be at that point where you can ask for good payment. Gabriella, what were you going to say?
I'm just thinking that if you have no idea where to start, something that I always advise people to do is to think about everything going to have to do for this campaign and how long it's going to take you. And then I would transcribe that to like an hourly rate. So if you're going to be the photographer and the copywriter and the editor, what are those people charging hourly? And you can kind of go from there to set a base rate for yourself. Also, if you're trying to license images and you don't really know what to charge, Getty Images has an image licensing calculator that you can put in. There's lots of tools on the internet. I would just stay away from anything that's like an influencer calculator, because a lot of times those take into account just your follower count instead of all the work that you're doing. And I think they're not very inaccurate and very much lowball creators all the time.
Wonderful answers. I would only add, if you go to a brand with your price and they immediately say, yes, it's too low. So the next time that you're going to go out and pitch, you need to raise your price because it's too low. Kelly had a really interesting question that we're running low on time. We're having such a great conversation. Kelly, but this is more of a strategic question. I don't know this is. She said, if you are already an affiliate of a company's program, how can you also get sponsored opportunities with them?
Yeah, I think if you position yourself in a way that shows your added value of talking about some of their products, maybe they have a product rolling out that you know about, or they have like seasonality. So they do like winter campaigns, or they do like summer campaigns or back to school things. I think if you're able to go to them and be like, oh, I'm an affiliate of yours. This is how well I have done talking about your products. These are the ideas I have for this upcoming cycle that you guys have that I have seen you have before, because I am loyal to your product and I use it a lot. So I think going back to just pitching, you do it the same way. Just like, I have this idea of how I want to incorporate this product into my content. Like, I would love to chat about any other opportunities beyond affiliate.
I think too, if you are doing well with them as an affiliate, right? Like if you're doing well with them and it's converting for them, and let's say it's a food product and we're going into holiday and you've got a baking series and you know you're going to use that ingredient a lot because you want to make the affiliate income too, but they might be having some ad dollars towards sponsored content. So why not hit that inbox with that information? It's also one thing I talked about were people with different titles. So whoever runs that affiliate program may not be who is looking for the influencers for sponsored work, branded content, social video, those types of things. So doing that research and being like, yeah, they do have an affiliate program, but I noticed they did a big holiday campaign last year when I did this blog search and I found it or whatever. And so you can kind of get an idea that like they may have budget that, we work with all different types of teams. And so there might be money elsewhere. So just because you're getting paid as an affiliate, it could be a big strength to getting that sponsored work, not a hindrance.
Yeah, if you can show that you're already of value to them, you're already selling, but the angle of a different type of content, a series of content, placement in email newsletters, whatever it is. If you want to add licensing to the table, or that they want to use your content, there's ways to do it. Just have the conversation. Okay, we are almost out of time, which is a huge bummer because I'm having a blast with you guys, and I know our audience is really enjoying soaking up all this expertise. But we always like to end with action items or real world tools that our audience can use when they're walking away from the episode. So are there any tools or resources that would be great to help our audience kick up their work with brands this quarter before we run out of Q2? And then also, we had a question from C way up at the top, and C, I did not forget about you. How can they position themselves in the best way to work with us, to work with Mediavine, if they're a Mediavine publisher? So Danielle, let's start with you and then go to Gabriella.
Well, the two questions work together, because I was going to say, use this as a tool, use this as a resource, and we are here to be a benefit to our Mediavine publishers. We're here we don't exclusively represent you for sponsored work, but we're another opportunity or potential opportunity for you guys to make money, and we want you to do that and do that well. So know that we are a resource as an internal team here for any like really big outstanding questions, but also, if you're a publisher, you can toggle on or opt into influencer. If you have been opted in for a while and it's been a minute since you've taken a look at that influencer dashboard, go in and give it a little refresh. We're going to be doing some refreshes to it soon too, which will give us even more insight about who you are. But being opted in will definitely help. So use that tool. I would say LinkedIn is a social platform, but that's a really good way to find people who work brand direct or at different agencies that are speaking about influencer, maybe shared a campaign that they did or that they're excited about. So, we do a lot of LinkedIn stalking, I would say, and that's a good tool. And then just, I still think keyword research is important. So whatever tool that you find that, helps you there, I think that those are the things I'd probably recommend offhand. Gabriella, what do you think?
I was just also going to say, be sure to be checking and answering any surveys that we put out. A lot of times we have brands that come with really specific niche asks. So we put out surveys to get more insight into if you would be a fit for this campaign, because oftentimes the dashboards don't have whether or not you have an orange cat in them. So we have to come and ask and, make sure we're pitching the right people for the right brands. Also, feel free to email either of us whenever and say hi and say that you're interested, because that also puts you on our radar. We work with so many publishers, so it's nice to hear and be like, oh, I love this person's blog. I would love to include them in our next pitch.
So a couple of different questions here. Brittany says, where is the influencer dashboard? Is that something that they should have that they don't have?
I think everyone has it in their Mediavine dashboard.
It's just your Mediavine dashboard.
Yeah,
so there's an area on there. It's not a separate dashboard. Yeah, just wanted to make sure. So it'll be in
Sweating
your
profusely.
Yeah, it's something you opt in your dash, and then there's just a bunch of questions that you can fill out that help us sort of drill down. And like I said, we're excited because we're going to give it a little refresh and add some more fields and things soon. But it gives us at least a good high level perspective. You can put some brands you might want to work with in there. Another thing that's really helpful is if you create content across a variety of verticals, maybe you do food and travel, make sure some secondary categories are in there too. So it helps us reveal people who are creating content, not just about maybe your biggest niche. Sometimes we find other voices that we never knew were talking about it. Also, we have brands that maybe they want to reach more like a lifestyle influencer who talks about their pets versus a pet niche influencer. So again, like Gabriella said, answering our surveys when they pop out helps, but the back end stuff definitely gives us a little bit of insight too.
Yes, and all of that. We have a question from Catherine that says, how do we reach you with questions in the future?
So you can reach us at just sponsored@mediavine.com. That'll hit our team, and then we can, do our best. You can also, if you send an internal message to people at Mediavine or talk to our support teams, they'll make sure they get it in our inbox too. So
fantastic. And am I right that now is the time to really be cranking for Q4? For
it
those
is
big Q4 campaigns?
It is time. I mean, I think we all know we kicked it off that it's summer next week, and it's crazy that it's June and it's almost July 4th, but we're seeing a big uptick, right? Everybody is sort of rolling up their sleeves now before that holiday. Brands and agencies typically plan 3 to 6 months out, like you guys probably do with a lot of your editorial calendars. So keep that in mind. Hopefully use this as some inspiration to do a big push between now and maybe July 4th.
Yep, and do that brand research on the beach. If you're on vacation, go to the pool and just be scrolling and making notes. That's what those notes apps are for. You can even talk to your phone.
Yeah.
Gabrielle, Danielle, thank you so much. Yes, have a great time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. And everyone, remember, sponsored@mediavine.com. If you have any questions, that'll get to them, or just talk to one of our support team and they will get you in the right place. Jump to the dashboard. There are instructions in the comments about how to keep that updated and ensure that we have the most updated information for you. And don't undersell yourself. I think that's the last thing I'll say is you guys create valuable content and you should be compensated for that in the way that suits you. All right, everybody, we will be back soon. Have a wonderful first time in summer, and we will see you guys later. Bye.
Thanks, guys.